day of Casual Connect 2012 in Kyiv. I'm David Nixon. I'm your MC for today. I'm also the first speaker. I'm not going to bother having a conversation with myself because that's a little weird. But I did want to mention that we did have one speaker that was not able to make it this morning, so there's a hole at 11 o'clock, but we'll fill it in between Alex and Joel from 505. So there are no parties tonight, so if anybody's going out, let me know. I may tag along. When I started preparing this presentation, I started with the idea that I was going to present about what Eastern European developers could learn from Western developers and vice versa, but and particularly as it related to games as a service businesses. And what I found as I was starting to research this presentation was that developers in the US didn't know any more than anybody else. And so I changed the thrust of my presentation just a little bit. I've spent the last 4 years taking teams that were developing products, game products, and figuring out how to take those same teams and have them build free-to-play games, games as a service. And what I found during that time frame is that you basically have to change almost everything about the way that you're doing business in order to make that work. And the reason for that is because the goals of developing a service-based business are completely different than the goals of developing a product-based business. And I want to give a little bit of an illustrative example. So this presentation that I'm making today, this is a product, right? I'm going to stand up here in front of you, and I'm going to give you a whole bunch of information about how you can change your development process or your design process or your marketing process to support running an online game service or a mobile game service. And you're going to take some notes and you're going to go away, and some of it will be useful and some of it won't. But on the other hand, this is more like what a game service is like. Hello.
Hello,
What is your name?
Alex.
What do you do, Alex?
Sitting and listening to you, David.
Alex, you make games, right?
Exactly.
So I think that you might be interested in making games as a service, right?
For sure.
I can help you with that. I have lots of information about games as a service, and you know what? I'm going to be your personal games as a service guy. What do you think you might need?
Are we talking about agreement between us?
No.
I'm kidding, David, I'm kidding.
No, I'm here to help you. Day in, day out, every day, I'm going to give you exactly what you need so that you can build a games as a service business. You can call me any time of the day or night. You can ask me to go research any information that you want. I'll even bring you customers. How does that sound?
That sounds amazing.
Awesome.
And,
Yeah?
just one request to you, David. Can you be with me not like 2 hours a day, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
No problem. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in Minsk. That's the difference between product and a service, right? I just made a commitment to Alex that I'm going to do everything that he needs to build his business, and this is the difference when you talk about the relationship between the customers that you have with a product and the customers that you have with a service. I have another little bit of an example here. Oops. I don't know how to use one of these. That's a product. I don't think Richard Simmons really cares whether you get strong and skinny. He just made a video, you plug it into your video machine, in this case probably a VCR. And if you do his exercises, maybe you get skinny, and if you don't do his exercises, maybe you don't. But in any case, he's already sold you the VHS tape, so he doesn't care anymore. This is personal training. This is somebody who's going to be with you every time you go to the gym, and he's going to take a look at you. He's going to say, geez, you know, you really could work on your upper body strength, so let's do some bench presses. Or, you know, it looks like you could use a little more vegetables in your diet. Here, I'm going to write up a nutrition plan for you. This is the difference between a product and a service-based business. Is in a service-based business, your job becomes not just giving a product to a whole bunch of customers, but giving a customized service to each one of your individual customers. And these are the things that have to change in your business. You have to change the way you think about product management. You have to change the way you think about production timelines. You have to change your QA practices. You have to change the way you think about the role of game design in your organization. You have to change the way that you think about how your partnerships work with other companies, because your company needs different things than it needed as a product-based business. You have to change the way you think about player preferences and how you think about how people play your game. You have to change the way you think about what is critical path for your organization. What are those things that really are the linchpins of success long-term for your organization? You have to change the way you think about success and failure. You have to change the way you think about solving problems. And you have to change the way you think about how your team communicates to each other and the other people that they have to communicate with. And if you don't change all of these different aspects of your product organization in order to go into a service-based business like free-to-play, you will most likely fail. And I've seen this happen many, many, many times. Either the organization doesn't make money, or they spin their wheels trying to make product after product that don't work, or in the worst case scenario, the team explodes, that the cohesiveness that existed with the team while they were building products together just doesn't work once you get into a service-based business. And the reason for this, like I said, is because in your organization, when you're running a game service, whether it's free-to-play or something else, you're running an online, ongoing service offering, mobile, web, Xbox, whatever, the goals of your business have changed. So let me start at the beginning. We'll talk about some practical implications of the way that product-based organizations have to change in order to be successful in a service-based business. So I'm sure all of you have seen charts that look like this. This is the software development lifecycle, software development process. Everybody's familiar with these terms, right? Brainstorming, QA, development. Anybody not understand what all this stuff is? No. Okay, so in a traditional product development cycle, you think about what you want to do, and then you write some design documentation about that so that your programmers understand what they're supposed to do and your artists understand what they're supposed to do. And then you go into this long cycle of development while you wait for things to be delivered. And then during that, sort of at the end of that cycle, you start passing some of that information off to QA, and QA comes back and tells you all the things that you've done wrong and everything that's broken. And if you have a good QA department, they'll even tell you some things that they think might not be a great user experience and maybe you should change. And then once your quality assurance team says that everything's okay, then you go to deployment. You spend some time making sure that it's carefully deployed and everything rolls out to where it's supposed to be and it all works. And then you release it to the market, and you take maybe 6, 12, maybe even up to 60 months to do this process. Nope, you can't do that anymore. Not at all. In fact, there are actually some very large, I found this out just recently, some very large, very successful companies that I've been working with lately that have no QA department. Does everybody in this room have a QA department? Is there anybody here who has a development team who doesn't have a QA department? You guys are already doing service games though, right? So the QA, the release cycles are so small and so frequent, and the process for releasing is so defined that the team itself is also ultimately responsible for its own QA. And even if they break something, and you see this even at Facebook, right? If anybody uses Facebook for more than 30 seconds, you probably run into something that's broken. Facebook is just going to fix that, right? They're like, oh, we broke something, but that's okay because we're going to deploy again in 10 minutes, so it doesn't matter, we'll fix it then. And so it becomes a constant cycle of iterating and releasing and iterating and releasing and iterating and releasing. And there's a couple of techniques that support this on a development side. And my friend Alex Shatrov, who I was grilling just a minute ago about what his games as a service business needs. I'm not really moving to Minsk, by the way. We already had that conversation. But he's implemented Scrum, and he's going to talk about how Scrum has really helped his development team structure to rapid releases. There's also something called constant releasing, which is basically testing all of your code against like a stub of your whole system to make sure that you're not going to break anything big, and then rolling it out every single day. And I'm working with a company in Florida that's implemented a system like that just over the course of the last 4 weeks. And the amazing thing about some of these techniques is you take a development team that says, there's no way no way we can possibly make a meaningful release in less than 4 weeks. I've heard that so many times. And my usual response is to turn to the CTO and say, Mr. CTO, you're fired. I'm going to get somebody who can release in less than 4 weeks. And within about 4 to 8 weeks, I'm usually able to get that team releasing every week. So this is why the project management has changed so much. All right? A release cycle is no longer a 6 to 12-month process. It's now a 1-week process. So you have to develop a system within your organization and an awareness in your team that allows you to make meaningful releases to your product every single week. You can't do that if your QA team takes 3 days to QA a product, because that only leaves you 24 hours for development. And you can't do anything in 24 hours, right? You need to be able to develop a system within your organization, a process, a mindset, a staffing mix, and a project management methodology that allows you to make meaningful releases every single week. And by the way, a week is a maximum, not a minimum, right? If you can release every 2 weeks, that's great, but you're still going too slow. Most of the successful teams that I work with actually release every day. They release something every day. They may not release anything super huge every day, but they release something every day. And over time, every single day, week after week, they update and update and update. And through those iterations, they make their game a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better over time. And 3, 4, 5 months down the line, they're actually doing pretty well. The second point that I want to make is that nobody important cares about your launch date anymore. I'm often asked the question by clients that I work with, when can we launch our game? And my answer is usually, you can launch your game whenever you like. Launch it tomorrow. Launch it next week. Launch it next year. The question is, what are you going to do with it once it's live? Are you asking me if this game is ready for you to spend $5 or $6 million in customer acquisition? I would say that'd be a bad idea. I don't think it's ready for that. But it might be ready for something. So when are you going to launch the game? This is nobody important, and by that I mean your customers who will play your game care when you launch, because they're not waiting for your game. They don't even know your game exists. So you want to have some goals, and obviously you want to get your game live, but your launch date should be determined by what you need to do with your game. Do you need customer feedback on your tutorial funnel? If so, launch your game and drive 10,000, 12,000, 20,000, 50,000 customers into your game so that you can get the data that you need. I actually was working with one of my clients, and we've been working very, very hard on the tutorial funnel for their game. And I got that question. I was, when can we launch? And I said, and I was looking at the configuration of the game in Facebook, and I looked and I realized they were already live. They forgot to turn on sandbox mode. So the game was already public, and I'd been playing it for 4 hours and posting open graph messages to all of my friends on Facebook. And I'm sure that all of you can imagine who my friends are. It's basically almost everybody in the industry. So the game was already live, and they didn't even know it. So obviously, you can launch the game whenever you want to. You just want to be clear when you launch the game and you make it publicly available. What are your goals? Are your goals to drive millions of customers in that game from day one? In that case, it better be really, really, really good. Otherwise, you're throwing that money out the window. If your goal is to drive in a few thousand customers and see how they perform through the permissions accept funnel, then do that. But stop worrying so much about launch, because in the end is the beginning in service development. So when you spend 3 months or 6 months building the coolest service-based game that you can, whether it's on iOS or Android or on Facebook, when you launch the game, your work begins. I was actually pretty surprised by that the first time I launched an online game. So I had been working in product development for a long time, and we had this game called Bubbletown. I was working with Oberon on this, and we decided we were going to build a Facebook version of the game called Bubbletown Party Planet. And we wrote a design, and we built the game, and we crunched and crunched and crunched for the last month, and I didn't sleep very much. And on launch day, I stayed up all night, and I had a big blow-up, meltdown, nervous breakdown, because when the thing actually rolled out, it didn't work. And then I had a big party because I found out that the reason it didn't work was because there was this little switch in Facebook that was supposed to be on, and it was off instead. So I switched it on, and everything worked. Customers were happy, and I went to bed, finally, after like 2.5 weeks. And I got up the next morning and found out that I had more work to do the next day after launch than I had had the previous day before launch. And that was a new experience for me because I was used to building a game for 6 or 8 months, launching the game, getting it live on whatever Big Fish Games or Real Arcade or whatever, and then taking a couple months off to rest and relax afterwards because all I could do after that point is wait and see the results. Well, that's not the case in service games. When you wake up the next morning after you launch your game, you're going to have more work than you had the day before. And if you're doing things right for about 9 months after your launch, you're going to be busier than you've ever been in your life. Because if you're successful and you get, 10 million people playing your game, every one of those 10 million people wants something from you and your team. And if you're doing your job right, you're listening and you're trying to figure out which of those things that you're going to do. So you just get busier and busier and busier. The end is the beginning in service-based game development. And then the last point I make here is there's no such thing as done. I've had developers and project managers say to me, when are we done working on this game? We want to go and work on our next game. Well, the reality is, as long as this game is successful, you're stuck with it. And this is one of the biggest problems that I actually see with managing development teams who are coming from a product-based business to a service-based business, and why so often they implode, is because developers, especially in the game industry, like to work on new stuff, right? Oh, I'm done with this game. I'm done with this stupid hidden object game. It's the third hidden object game that I've made over the course of the last year. And now I get to go on and I get to build a strategy war game, and I've wanted to build a strategy war game all my life. And then you finish the strategy war game and you're like, I never want to see another strategy war game ever again, and now I get to go work on a first-person shooter. That's not the way it works. You, as a team, build this game and you put it out there, and now you've got millions of people who want you to evolve that experience and continue to invest time and effort and release content to them and figure out how to make this game more and more valuable. And you're stuck with it for a year, or if you're lucky, 2 years, or if you're really, really lucky, 5 years, working on the same game, little features, 1 week at a time, making the game better and better and better. So actually, one of the biggest problems that companies who are successful in this kind of business have is they have a really difficult time growing their organization. They have tons of money. And this is true of the small, successful developers, and it's true of the big, successful developers, even Zynga, right? They have tons and tons and tons of money in the bank, and they can't find enough good people to hire that they can actually scale up and make another team. That's why Zynga's willing to pay $200 or $300 million for a team that has a successful track record in social games, because holy shit, they get a whole team all at once and they can immediately go off and start making some new games. They don't care whether the game that that particular developer has is successful or unsuccessful. It might make a difference in the price they pay, but they have acquired teams that don't even have successful games just so that they go out and build their business. And the key is, so because the service-based games require that your developers stay on them for 2 or 3 years at a time, successful games, the only way that you can grow your business is to add another successful team to it. And those teams are getting more and more rare, and that experience is getting harder and harder to find. Wow, I could talk about this forever, huh? I better move it along. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is how we have to change your view as far as what product success means. So this is the old style, right? We launch here at the bottom of the graph, and the game goes whoop and sells like crazy, and you make $10 million, and you win. Woohoo, everybody wins. Nope, that's not the way it works anymore. Success criteria changes. Maybe not daily, but a lot. So when you first launch your game, maybe your very first goal is that you want to increase your tutorial completion rate to 97.5%. And for the first 3 weeks that the game is live, that's your goal. And then the next goal is that you want to have a day one retention of 72%, and that's your goal. And then your next goal is that you want to be able to make sure that people get through that bottleneck at the 17th quest, or figure out why you have such a steep drop-off in your engagement in the game at level 7, right? So as you build the game, or as you launch the game and as you evolve your game, your success criteria changes, and it's not always about the money. I have one client right now whose sole goal as an organization is to increase DAU. And so they're not talking about, their game happens to monetize really well, but they don't care about the monetization right now because their big problem is they don't have anybody to monetize to. So they're trying to figure out what it is about how they're doing their customer acquisition, or how they're doing their user education, or how they're doing their quest system, or how they're doing their leveling, or how they're introducing new content to try and increase retention, increase DAU. So your success criteria is going to change based on where the game is in its life cycle. There's a life cycle for these games where you want to grow them up, and then once they get to a certain point and it looks like you can't grow them anymore, then you start harvesting your users. And you might harvest your users by cross-promoting them to another game, or you might harvest your users by trying to suck more money out of them. But in the early stages of the game, you're going to be putting features in the game that inspire people to play it longer so that your game will grow. And in the later stages of the game, you might be disabling or changing those very same features, because now you're thinking about how you want to monetize people and not how you want to grow the game. And maybe that particular retention feature, I don't know, an example might be when you get to level 5, you get 10,000 hard currency. That could be really good for engagement in the early stages of your game, but really bad for monetization later on. So your success criteria changes. You have to accept that that's true, and you have to talk about it all the time. If you and your team members don't know exactly what it is that you're trying to change at any given moment, then you should go talk to somebody about it. If you don't know what your success criteria is, or you think that the success criteria, and if your success criteria, by the way, involves an event horizon that's longer than about 6 months, you should go talk to somebody, because ultimately you're probably working on something that doesn't matter right now today. Maintain a commitment to act. If you're doing weekly release cycles, you need to be not afraid to release. I know too many development teams that get sort of caught up in this idea that, well, if we release, we might break something. That's the road to stagnation, and you need to keep going. And you need to understand why. No matter what you're doing, understand why you're doing it and what your goal is, because you may be the guy on the team or the woman on the team who says, you know what, if our goal is this, then it doesn't make sense for me to be doing what I'm doing today. And then I was going to say, did I mention you're never done, right? I did, I think I said that. But that on this slide I have a corollary for that, which is don't give up. Lots and lots of examples of games that came out, and at the very beginning, in the first 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, didn't see much success, but the development team was diligent about listening to their customers and evolving their game slowly, week after week, better and better, and then they saw success. And I think one of the big examples of that, I can think of two, right? Wooga made 2 different games that struggled for a very long time. One was called Bubble Island, which is one of the most popular games on both mobile and social right now. And the other was Monster World. Both of those games struggled for months out of the starting gate, but they finally figured it out. They got it right. They found their audience, and they exploded. Game design. We've got to change the way we do game design. Big game design Bibles, thing of the past. Start at the beginning of your game experience and start your design process thinking about how you're going to get that first 5 minutes or even that first 10 seconds absolutely perfect and ready to go. Build your game design specs or your mini specs on theories about player behavior. So start thinking about, how do players use my game, and what do they want to do, and how can I give them more of that versus what do I think would be fun? I have a story from a friend of mine that used to work at Zynga. They have a phrase, you have a lot of conviction about that. And conviction is usually a good thing, right? It usually means that you're passionate about what you believe. At Zynga, conviction means, boy, you sure are talking a lot about stuff you have no data to support. Which kind of means, yeah, you're full of shit. So make sure that when you are, as a game designer in a service-based game, you're thinking about how customers are using your game, you're looking at your data, you're collecting additional data, and data doesn't just mean analytics. Data might mean user testing. Data might mean having your mom play the game and give you some feedback. All of that is data. And take that data and turn it into measurable tests on how to change a particular player behavior, or KPI, that you actually want to move. You want to start and end with customer feedback in game design and never, ever, ever get too attached to anything, right? You may love this idea for this particular feature, but the reality is your audience doesn't care. And if your audience doesn't care, They're going to tell you because they're not going to use that feature, or they're going to complain about that feature, or they're going to ask you for something else. And the best thing that you can do as a game designer in a service-based game is to put aside your ego, put aside your love for that particular feature, put it on the shelf for a little while, come back to it later when your audience wants it. And by the way, you're never done. So the last thing, I think this is the last thing I want to talk about is marketing. So the old style of marketing was that you build a product and then you throw it over the wall to the marketing people. And if the game's successful, you say, woohoo, we made a great game. And if the game's bad, or the game's not successful, you go, you marketing people, you suck. Because I made a great game and you couldn't sell it, right? Of course, they do the exact opposite, right? If the game's successful, they go, woohoo, we executed great marketing. And if the game's bad, they go, you product development people, you suck. That's not the way it works anymore. And here's my big point for this whole slide. We're all in marketing now. I don't care if you're a product developer or a game designer or a product lead or, I don't know, a database designer. We are all in marketing now because what we're building is we're building direct marketing businesses that look like games. And when I say direct marketing, basically what I'm saying is that your game's job is to find, speak to, acquire, and retain customers. That's it. It's not to be fun, although it probably should be, because games that aren't fun don't tend to do very well. But your game's job is to acquire and retain, to some extent, monetize customers as well. And that means that every single one of us is in marketing. And the marketing people, to some degree, are in product development, right? Because your game is your best marketing engine. I think that Oscar, that was what you said yesterday, right? So Oscar did a very nice, touchy-feely, we should all be happy and make joy games, right? I'm not saying that same thing. What I'm saying, I mean, he's right, but what I'm saying is that you need to make a game that speaks to your customers. And when I say that, I mean it literally. So I did an experiment recently with one of my clients who was very much a traditional game developer, and they thought in terms of game feature. And I was like, look, let me design just one feature for you, and we'll put it in your game, and I bet you we do better from a revenue perspective. They were trying to figure out how to increase monetization. And so I designed a feature that allowed them to take stuff that already existed in the game and feature it at a discount price for 1 week, and to do that every single week and build some tools so that they could do more of that if it worked. So every single week they had this opportunity to offer customers a limited edition special promotion for something in the game, some big item or whatever, right? And they could do this with anything in the game, not just the stuff that they were currently selling in the shop, but anything in the game. And then around that, I also built in some promotional process that said, okay, when you start the game, we're going to tell you about the deal, and we're going to put a little icon on the screen so that people know when it's active, and we're going to build some art that we're going to use to promote this out to the community, and we're going to do this whole process once a week, every week, for 8 weeks and see what happens. We tripled revenue. And the big difference was this was all stuff that was already in the game, but we were treating the game as a marketing engine to actually speak to customers about what they actually cared about. And we experimented around with different types of items and different types of packages to see what the audience would consume and what they didn't really care about. And then we did more of that and optimized it. And they're going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of this one feature that at the bottom line, if I were to boil it down at a conceptual level, I would describe it as this feature tells your customers what they can buy and why. So this is why your game is the most important marketing tool, is because every day people are coming in and playing your game, and they will do what you ask them to do. And most of the time, they won't do the things that you don't ask them to do because they don't know they should. So speaking to your customers every single day through the communication medium, which is your game, is really, really important. The next thing that I wanted to mention is that there's this idea of product management, which has been around in the US for a while, but I think it's a relatively new concept over here. So a product manager is a marketing person who sits with the development team and thinks about what we should do and why. And then that's different than a producer or a project manager who thinks about what we should do and how. And the two of them work together to figure out what actually gets done and in what order and what priority. Product management, as a skill set, a good product manager is your single point of failure in a service-based game business. because these are the guys that every single day go in and play the game, talk to their customers, talk to the people who are using the game, talk to other product managers that are making a game, look at what Zynga's doing, look at what Playdum's doing, figuring out what it is we should do next on our product so that we can be competitive and our product can do better. And if you have a product manager that does that well, then every single day your game will do better than the day before. And if you have a product manager that does that poorly, then that won't happen, and it's going to be really difficult to find success. So this particular skill set, product management, is something that as this region begins to move more and more strongly into service-based game development, this particular skill set has to evolve. And if you don't have this particular person on your service-based game development team, then you're pretty much screwed from the start. So figure out who this person is, make sure they're really, really good, and then let them do what they say they're going to do. Get out of their way. Because these are the ones that are going to drive how your product improves and how fast your product improves and how successful you are at making it improve. And by the way, you're never done. So I want to leave you with some encouraging words because I feel like I've been standing up here lecturing and yelling at everybody for the whole time. Free-to-play games is an awesome, awesome way to build a successful business. There's a lot going for it. You can monetize customers like you would not believe. So instead of having a critical mass or a maximum velocity of 99 cents per customer like you would with a premium game on a mobile game, you can have some customers who pay you nothing but contribute virality to your game, and you can have some customers that pay you 99 cents because that's their upper limit, and you're going to have some customers that maybe pay you $1,000 over the life of the time that they've played the game. So there's a tremendous opportunity to monetize people in free-to-play games. It's a really, really much better way to monetize a game experience than premium games are. But it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of effort. It's also very satisfying, and it's something that you can learn over time. Right? You don't have to know all this stuff right when you launch your game. But as long as you continue to work every single day to make it a little better and a little better and a little better, chances are you will be successful. It's not that you might be successful. Chances are you absolutely will fundamentally, if you listen to your customers and you follow an iterative approach and you maintain an open mind and you test and you design and you have a good product manager, you will have a game that is ultimately successful. Good luck. I'm a little over time, but like I said, we have some extra time this morning, so I can take a couple of questions if there are any. There's one right back there. You want to run the mic back to him? He's back behind the camera. Do you have a question?
No. I wanted to ask a question that I was very confused of. When you were talking about the QA.
Mm-hmm.
You are talking that we should extract the QA and not use it as we do now.
Are you a QA lead?
No, I'm not, but I developed from QA. So,
yeah. So did I, by the way. I spent 8 years as a QA manager. I believe that QA has a tremendously important role in product development. And that's why I was a bit surprised when this company that I kind of idolized, that's a very large, very successful social and social mobile game company, the CEO of that company said, yeah, we don't have QA. I was like, what? It's not that you don't do QA. QA always has to get done. But what ends up happening is that because you're in iterative cycles and because the amount of stuff that you might break with any development cycle is fairly small, you don't have big centralized QA resources. And oftentimes what happens is QA ends up getting done by people like your community management, your junior programmers. These are people that have a little bit of extra time and need to be in there taking a look at your game anyway. They end up doing the QA that needs to be done on an iterative basis. Or maybe you have one QA tester as a part of the team that also is your localization guy for Turkish. So what happens? So what I'm saying is that what I've seen in this particular process is that you don't have big QA Bibles, you don't have big test plans, you have small decentralized QA teams that focus on things like server health or deployment accuracy, right? So QA ends up taking a much different form.
And about the further development, when you upload new stuff every week,
Yep.
We all know what programmers are capable of. Just small hotfix and you are done.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
What do you think about QA in the life cycle of the game?
You mean live QA?
No,
Mil-
I mean you upload new stuff every week,
Uh-huh.
and should you do the QA every week for the new stuff?
Somebody should, well, first of all, you're going to have several hundreds of thousands or millions of people QAing your game every minute of every single day and letting you know if anything's broken, because that's what an engaged community does. So that's one kind of QA. There have been times in the past, particularly with companies that I've worked with that work on dedicated server systems rather than cloud-based server systems, where there's significant opportunity for failure at the DC, right? So in that particular case, I usually have one or two people who their job is just to always play the game. We might call them community managers, or we might call them sysops or something along those lines, system administrators, but their job is to just make sure that the game is always up and running. And so it's almost like a constant QA process. But having dedicated people whose job is just to do QA may be a thing of the past in this particular instance, that it's usually QA and something else because they have such a deep knowledge of the game system and the community that is attached to that game system that they're able to contribute in a lot of different ways, not just technical bugs.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'll take one more question. Right here. Right down here in front. Hang on. Let me bring you the microphone.
David, are you product managing any games right now?
Yes, I'm product managing 3 games right now.
Oh, that was my question. So I was wondering whether CEO is still hands-on, low level in the production.
Which CEO?
If CEO and founder is low level, hands-on
I
in
see.
production, that was my question.
Gemini Hive is a small investment and consulting firm that does seed investment for startup development companies. So essentially, I'm a consultant for hire, and part of what I consult on, in fact, the predominant thing that I consult on is product management. So I'm not product managing my own games, I'm product managing other people's games. If I were CEO of my own game company, I wouldn't be doing any product management. I wouldn't have time to do any product management. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Let's switch to Alex Shatroff, CEO of Playtika Belarus, to talk about Scrum development.